The Great War, or the French and Indian War, was a war fought for the settlement of the American territory. Before the war, the French and British coexisted in the same area of territories for about 100 years, without any problems. After the trade and population in the area increased, both the British and the French looked for new territories to settle in. The Native Americans often helped the French and British secure their land holdings. One of the major causes of the French and Indian War was a misunderstanding about a territory. A group of Virginians claimed about 500,000 of acres of land in the Ohio Valley without knowing that the French had claimed it first. The French began to build fortresses to secure their settlements. After seeing this, the British felt threatened and decided to build their own fortresses and to prepare their militia for war. One other cause was a difference in religion. The French were Catholics, while the British weren't. The British were used to freedom in their religious matters and weren't prepared to convert into a religion that was controlled by the Pope. In April 1754, Washington is on his way to establish a post at the Forks of Ohio, but soon learned that the French had already set up a fort there. He was warned the French were advancing and quickly threw up fortifications, aptly naming the entrenchment Fort Necessity, and marched to try and stop the French troops from advancing. In the skirmish, the French commander was killed and most of his men were captured and defeated. He arrived back at Fort Necessity and faced in an all-day battle fought in drenching rain against the French. He was greatly outnumbered with no food, low ammunition, as well as damp, and under the terms of surrender he was allowed to march his troop back to Williamsburg. At the end of 1754, Washington resigned, not being able to face the defeat and being angered by the discrimination between British and colonial officers in rank and pay. In 1755, he volunteers to join General Edward Braddock's expedition against the French. When he turned 23, he was promoted to colonel and was appointed commander-in-chief of the Virginia militia. General Braddock dispatched in America in 1754 to restore and strengthen British positions in the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes. He was sent to America in 1755 as commander-in-chief to capture Fort Duquesne, and where he led his troops west from Virginia. Camping was part of his master plan devised by the Duke of Cumberland to drive French out of America. Braddock was ambushed by the French and Indian allies on the Monongahela River. The Iroquois were neutral most of the time, but when British strength grew, they turned against the French. The Declaration of Support in 1758 made a British attack on Fort Niagara possible. 1,500 Iroquois and 2,000 soldiers were led by British Indian Superintendent Sir William Johnson and were met by the Algonquin tribe and 8 other former French allies and signed a treaty. William Johnson established strong relations with Indian tribes such as the Mohawk, which is part of the Iroquois. He learned their language, dressed in their clothing, and welcomed them into his home. In 1744, Johnson was made Superintendent of Indian Affairs. During the French and Indian War, Johnson's military assault against Crown Point was unsuccessful, but he came victorious against the French at Lake George, where he put up Fort William Henry in 1755. They fought because they wanted control over the land. 1756, Montcalm took hold of Oswego and 1,600 prisoners, gaining the French control of the Great Lakes region. Montcalm captured Fort William Henry a month later, but the Indians were very unreliable allies for the French. The Indians would fight when they wanted, and they would randomly disappear to go and handle their own business affairs. The English attacked Quebec, and Montcalm only had 3,000 troops. Montcalm could not ask Paris to help because they were suffering greatly in the European war against England. After several failed attacks on Quebec, Wolfe ordered a successful one in September of 1759. General Montcalm ordered the French troops to attack back, but Governor Vaudreuil of Canada counter-demanded the order so that only some French troops attacked. Wolfe and Montcalm were mortally wounded, and the English had won their battle. General Vaudreuil, within a few hours, surrendered Quebec. All of Canada was relinquished by France and became English colonies. In 1763, the French gave up all of its territory east of the Mississippi River except for the Louisiana area and the New Orleans.